So I'm going to offer some more course bonus points, so make sure you listen to all of this video. So I'm going to actually provide a little bit more instruction with respect to constructing arguments in this format. That is, I'm going to say some things that might be helpful, some things that I didn't say with response to paragraph I, so you might go back and work on paragraph I in terms of the extra credit argument construction you could do. There was a required argument that I articulated verbally only that you had to present in this way, but I also gave you an extra credit option. So similar to the extra credit option for paragraph I, for paragraphs K and L, you're required to construct two arguments. Again, these arguments are arguing in support of the conclusion that it is sometimes morally permissible or might sometimes be morally permissible to loot. So that's what you're going to write here. So this video obviously is for both paragraphs. So you will do this twice. And again, the way that I've had you guys, or let me say that the way I've had you guys construct arguments in the past, I've had you do it in paragraph form. And when I had you do that, I always have you state your conclusion first, and then you give your reasons in support of your conclusion. What I'm having you do here at the end of the semester is I'm having you construct an argument that you may or not, support or on behalf of someone else, but I'm having you present premises first or reasons first, and then the conclusion. So again, this is called a formatted argument. And as you can see in a formatted argument, it's much more obvious what is a reason, what's a premise, and what's a conclusion. Now, one thing I forgot to do is remind you guys that you have to be working with the definition for argument that you were introduced to in your book and that I emphasized in other assignments in topic responses for discussion boards. Remember, an argument is a set of statements, so there should be no questions, no commands, and no sentence fragments when you're constructing arguments, whether it's in paragraph form or with the conclusion first, or whether it's in this formatted version with the conclusion last. No questions and no commands, things that say, go shut the door. Now, if you say people should protest, that's okay. It sounds like a command. It kind of is, but it counts as a moral statement in terms of logic, philosophy, and ethics. So with that said, make sure that you do not have any questions anywhere in these argument constructions, because an argument is a set of statements only, technically speaking. You can have arguments that have statements with questions that are rhetorical questions where the answer or the statement is implied, but we're being direct and obvious. We're not being indirect through rhetorical devices. So keep all that in mind. Only statements. Everybody has the same statement for all of the argument constructions, right? What's different with respect to the required argument for paragraph I, the extra credit argument for paragraph I, and the required arguments for paragraphs K and L is the focus, the ideas that you're pulling from each paragraph. So you have to make sure that while you're arguing for the same conclusion in each of these paragraphs, and of course the required one in paragraph I did that one as a demonstration, you have to make sure that for each of these arguments, so for example, when you get to paragraph J, that you're pulling from ideas that are the focus of paragraph J. When you construct an argument for paragraph K, you need to pull from ideas that are unique to or the focused or iterated in paragraph K. Sorry, I shouldn't say J. I should say K and L, right? Let me make sure I got that right. Sorry, I didn't mean to say J. I meant to say K and L. There is no J. Argument construction. So if you don't have it open, go ahead and open the article to page 3 and go to paragraph K. So I think I asked you about questions of, words that I highlighted as fundamental and powerful concepts. So you might look at that list of words and use some of those 1 or 2 words as part of your reasoning, the statements that you come up with as your premises in support of that conclusion. So for example, in paragraph K, I'm looking at form of empowerment. How can you use that phrase to construct a statement, a sentence that offers support for the conclusion, a form of empowerment? You could say looting is a form of empowerment. Or if looting provides empowerment, it might be permissible to loot, right? So I'm trying to give you ideas of how to use paragraph K. Since I already used the example of form of empowerment, you can no longer use that for paragraph K for your argument construction. But there's lots of other ideas that you could incorporate. And by the way, you don't have to use an if-then statement if you don't want to in your argument. For paragraph K, I said, if looting provides a form of empowerment, then looting might be morally permissible. I could have said looting provides a form of empowerment. Now, like I said, you cannot use the idea of looting providing a form of empowerment, that phrase from paragraph K. But there's lots of other phrases and words in that paragraph that name usable, either fundamental and powerful concepts or usable ideas that you can use in forming premises in support of a conclusion. So in K, you can focus on the claim or idea that looting is a way to reclaim dignity after decades of abuse at the hands of police and other authorities. I would be fine with you guys pulling, big portions of the paragraph. Just make sure that you are constructing really good sentences, right? You can't just plop a sentence from the paragraph. You have to make sure that the sentence looks good. What else do we have in paragraph K? In the quote, you could take something from the quote, something about the ability to gain some power back. You could say something about, looting and with respect to that idea, or you could say something or add as a reason something along the second part of that quote in paragraph K, something about taking the opportunity or taking opportunities to do something, right? So you get the idea. So everything that I just said applies to the argument construction that you do for paragraph L as well. You're pulling from each of those paragraphs some claim or part of a claim, ideas or phrase to inform sentences that you construct as statements functioning as premises or reason in support of a conclusion you may or may not agree with. Okay, so now for more extra credit, I really hope students who are struggling in this class, and have a few of you are, have D's right now, some of a smaller fraction have strong F's, I guess you could call it. I'm going to offer you 5 course bonus points again, okay? So for this 5 course bonus points, I want you to do the following. I want you to remember the definition for intellectual empathy. Okay, you were introduced to that earlier in the semester. So intellectual empathy is and you'll need to copy this for extra credit, is the awareness of the need and the ability to give me just a second here. Oh, crap. Sorry, I didn't mean to move that. Oh, no, you're fine. Okay, let me back up. I'm going to phrase this differently. So we're going to say that intellectual empathy is the disposition to imaginatively put oneself in the thinking place of others so as to genuinely understand another reasoning and conceptual frameworks. Okay, so make sure that you start off with this definition. So you would say something like, Dr. C defined, quote, intellectual empathy, and then you put close quote, as, and then quote, okay? Now, remember, intellectual empathy does not necessarily mean that you have to agree, endorse, or adopt the point of view that you're trying to understand. Also remember that you express intellectual empathy even if you do happen to think that it is sometimes morally permissible to loot. you still have to practice intellectual empathy in the argument constructions for the paragraphs, right, that we focused on. Why? Because I'm telling you to pull from the thinking of others, the people discussed in the articles, the sociologist in those paragraphs, or how the author's framing things as he practices intellectual empathy to explain why people think it might be morally permissible to loot. So even if you agree with everything that's said, you're still having to pull from the thinking or ideas or other to create premises or reasons on their behalf to formally argue for, in an explicit way, the conclusion. So you are still using some kind of imaginative faculty in your thinking, in your brain, to put yourself in the thinking place of others by pulling out their concepts and ideas from those paragraphs. And an ultimate way to show that you really understand somebody's reasoning, their logic, their arguments, the words that name fundamental and powerful concepts and how they hang together in their thinking, is to form arguments on their behalf. And this happens whether or not you agree because you're using their ideas. Okay, so some other things that I want you to keep in mind. So write down a couple of things if you're going for extra credit here. Somebody who's intellectually empathetic recognizes that human thinking emerges from the conditions of life, very different contexts and situations. That's a point that I picked up in this book by this lady named Linda Elder, and I forgot the guy's first name, Richard Paul. When you have intellectual empathy, you make a good faith effort to understand someone else's thinking. So that's what you need to be doing in this article. You're willing to work through a set of assumptions other than your own, even if the view happens to pose your own, even if you agree with it. So in having you construct reasons for the conclusion, whether or not you agree with it, since you are constructing reasons using the ideas of others, you are trying to work through a set of assumptions other than your own. Able to recognize and admit why others might find a point of view compelling. If you construct a decent argument for the conclusion using their ideas, that's exactly what you're doing. You're demonstrating through argument construction using somebody else's ideas why a point of view might be compelling. Another thing that I meant to say about all of the argument constructions is that you can have more than one premise, you can have more than two premises. If you want to list more than two premises, go for it, but be careful, don't go overboard. So now that I've done that little lecture and reminder on intellectual empathy, what you can do is I want you to rate yourself. Okay, so I want you to write your first sentence. In your first sentence, you will give me a rating. Okay, and your rating will be between 1 and 5. 1 will mean that it was very difficult for you to reflect and manifest intellectual empathy while constructing the arguments on behalf of people who think it's morally permissible, at least sometimes, to loot. 2 will mean is that so 1 means you found it very difficult. 2 means you found it a little difficult. 3 means you are neutral on the question. 4 means you found it fairly easy to reflect intellectual empathy. And notice, I'm not saying, can you construct an argument? Do you know what a premise or conclusion is? That's not what this rating is about. The rating is about whether or not you are able to do what's here in this definition for intellectual empathy. How easy, how well or challenging or easy was it for you to imaginatively put yourself in the thinking place of others in a particular paragraph so as to genuinely understand them and their reasoning and conceptual frameworks. And really, what you're focused on when you're looking at those paragraphs is their ideas. So it's more their conceptual frameworks. You were drawing from their concepts and big ideas to construct the arguments. So one is you had a very difficult time doing this, trying to construct the argument on behalf of said conclusion or the respective conclusion. 2 was somewhat difficult, but okay, you did okay. 3 is neutral. 4 is you found it fairly easy to reflect intellectual empathy, in other words, to do this, and the stuff that I lectured on. And 5 is that you found it very easy to reflect intellectual empathy. It comes natural to you. You rocked it or whatnot. So for extra credit, you'll write a little paragraph of 3 to 5 sentences. Your first sentence well, tell me what the rating is. For intellectual empathy while constructing the arguments about looting being morally permissible, I would give myself the rating of whatever. Give me the number, and then give me another sentence that tells me what did I say that number means. Okay? Then I want 3 more sentences where you explain or justify the rating. Why have you rated yourself that way? You need to use words from this definition in your explanation, and you need to think about what it was like for you psychologically, subjectively, to construct the arguments that you have in this assignment.